Cold War, Soviet Union. In a world where the communist East stands face to face with its capitalist Western foe, both sides arm themselves to the teeth to show their muscles. Either side finds themselves often accusing each other of disturbing each other's peace, influencing and even arming surrounding states, performing military actions or nuclear tests, sending out spies. For the Soviet military command, one of these situations proved to be of the uttermost challenge. The 80s for the Soviet Union meant the start of a new invasion of the, back then, neighboring nation of Afghanistan. Just after Christmas 1979, multiple heavy armored military divisions made their way over the border. With their strength in men, tanks, BTRs, helicopters and fighter jets, the plan of the Soviet commanders was to overthrow the Afghan government in Kabul with one fell swoop, alongside with those who tried to oppose the Soviet military. Though the scorching desert and mountainous terrain of Afghanistan, the Soviets made their way forward, but little did they know, this would cost them dearly. The Soviets weren't just up against anyone. Even after taking control of the Afghan capital, and even after setting up a new puppet Afghan leader, Babrak Karmal, they were still far away from a victory on the land they hadn't seized control over. The Soviets were up against the Mujahideen. These were a large guerrilla force fighting both the Soviet Union and the Soviet indoctrinated government parties of Afghanistan. The Mujahideen seized the presence of the Soviets as a threat to their freedom. These men weren't just enemies. These were fierce fighters who knew and could handle the tough Central Asian terrain and its blazing hot temperatures. In a sandy and rough environment such as here, Soviet tank divisions could easily break down, forcing infantry to stop moving up, and before they knew, they could end up in the Valley of Death, surrounded by Afghan militia that would pop out of nowhere. And where the Soviet soldiers wanted to stay alive no matter what, the Mujahideen had a different mentality. A mentality of seeing death in a war as an honor, a proof of giving their life for Allah and their freedom. A mentality worth fearing, and feared they were. For about 9 years, the bitter war would hold the country in its grip, and the fighting continued.
As 5 guerrillas crawled through the minefield surrounding the besieged outpost, mortars and recoilless rifles began a barrage of covering fire.
But why did the Soviets enter Afghanistan? What was the reason for the Soviet attack on Afghanistan? Did it have any strategical or political advantages? For the Soviet Union, Afghanistan was portrayed as a buffer state between them and the Western world. It was like this because Pakistan, formerly even known as British India, was under Western influence. The United States played a big role, which, in turn, alongside Saudi Arabia, even helped the Mujahideen in their battle against the Soviets. Getting control over Afghanistan would mean they wouldn't have to worry about anti-communist movements or hostility directly at their own border anymore. At least, that's what they thought. The reality turned out very different. For almost a decade, Soviet troops fought on the unforgiving Afghan soil to gain control over the surrounding areas, but eventually got exhausted. While the war was still ongoing, a new leader was about to follow up the secretary of the Communist Party, Brezhnev. His name was Gorbachev, and his methods would prove to be different from his predecessors. Gorbachev decided to take his troops out of Afghanistan, and his decision to withdraw was in line with his broader foreign policy of reducing Soviet military involvement abroad and improving relations with the West. This meant Afghanistan was now on their own again, containing their government and people. After the withdrawal, even a new head of state was declared in Afghanistan, President Mohammed Najibullah. But little did anybody know, in the year 1992, under the instabilization of the country, his government collapsed. When the plans of withdrawal were announced in the chamber of the Soviet Communist Party, Gorbachev was applauded. The television showed footage of families happily being reunited with their sons, fathers, and brothers, and husbands who were sent out to war. The Soviet national anthem plays.
Into the arms of his 15-year-old son. There was hoopla and ceremony at the border.
But the people of the Soviet Union, they have seen this before.
Ever getting involved. Meanwhile, the Soviet-trained and equipped Afghan army is apparently falling apart.
Здравствуйте, дорогие мои родители. С большим гвардейским приветом к вам. Мама, папа и бабушка, я к вам. Извините меня, что я так долго не писал. Не было конвертовой бумаги. Здесь с этим очень туго. Лезвия здесь тоже нет. Так что, если сможете, то вышлите, пожалуйста. Наклейте на бумажку в конверте и отошлите вместе с письмом. На здоровье свое я не жалуюсь. Одним словом, живу я нормально. На этом писать я кончаю. Извините за короткое письмо. Передавайте всем привет. До свидания. И расписался. Больше он ничего не писал. Это последнее письмо было. Через неделю. Даже, наверное, недели не прошло. Нам сообщили, что он